Where the Lonely Ones Roam by Glimmerglanger. Read by Exmanhater. The city's really grown, Adora said when they finally made it to Catra's quarters, walking without a limp and with no evidence of exhaustion. Catra shrugged. You're looking better. Adora glanced at her, looking surprised. I feel better, she said, and her expression crumbled into discomfort. I don't think I ever thanked you for saving my life. Catra sped up her steps a little. You didn't, she said, the words tumbling sharp around her teeth. Well, I should have. Catra. Adora reached out and caught her arm, pulled her to a stop, the way she used to do when she was always keeping Catra from running off into some new piece of bad decision-making. Catra looked at her hand and then away, the touch picking at the scabs inside her chest. Look, these negotiations are important. Negotiations? Catra asked, her mind scrambling to adjust to this change in subject. She pulled her arm away. Oh, is that what you're here for? And what do we have to negotiate with Bright Moon? It's about the city's status, Adora said, and Catra could feel her fidgeting. Queen Angela is concerned about the city's growth. Haven, Catra said, climbing onto the windowsill and perching. What? Adora always sounded so delightful when she was confused. The village. They're calling it Haven. She folded her arms over her knees. All right, Adora cleared her throat. Queen Angela is concerned about Haven's growth. Why? Catra tilted her face up. She abandoned this land to the Horde. We've already been over this. What does she care what we do? Because she... Adora swore, coming over to the window and bracing her hands on the sill, so her shoulder almost brushed Catra's knees. She glanced downwards. Can I tell you the truth? She asked, sounding miserable. I don't know, Catra said, raising an eyebrow. Can you? Adora cut her a sharp look, but something in her expression softened almost right away, the way it used to, the way that made Catra's heart ache, sharp and sudden every time. Haven is almost as large as the largest city in Bright Moon, Adora said quietly, and it keeps growing. Catra stared at her, and maybe it was the ache in her chest that made her say, We're not going to attack you. You can tell Angela to relax. We just want to make it through the winter. That's what I told them, Adora said, like she knew all about Catra's intentions, like she... But she did. Catra bit the insides of her cheeks and looked away, trying to smother the sting of being known, of Adora being right about her. But, Adora started, because there was always a but, wasn't there? But they'd feel more secure if you came to Bright Moon and spoke with Queen Angela. Catra stared at Adora, her clear eyes, the pinch of her mouth. You mean kneel before Angela, she said, tilting her head to the side. She felt her hair, so long now, sliding over her shoulder. She watched Adora's eyes track the fall of it. You mean what? Promise to be a good citizen of Bright Moon? Adora blinked, her eyes grown darker, and then shook herself with a grimace. That would make them happy, yes. I won't, Catra said, her voice gone flat and hard. I know, Adora said. I won't kneel before any princess, ever. The words came out a hiss, and she flinched at the sound, bracing for a blow that never came. I know, Adora said, bowing her head over. Will they try to make me? Adora blew out a breath, staring forward at nothing. I don't know, she said. I don't think so. For a moment, the silence curled around them, broken by the sounds from the city below. Why are you telling me this? Catra asked finally. It was the one question she couldn't answer inside her own head. Adora wrinkled her nose again and looked over at Catra, the tension in her expression falling away as she looked her fill. She shifted, facing Catra, warm and close. Because you saved my life, she said. And because you're fixing it. This place. One day at a time, and you deserve to know what they've been thinking about it. She sounded ragged by the end. Catra watched her, her chest aching, the way it only ever did around Adora. She reached out, watching the movement from a distance, and touched Adora's wrist. Adora sucked in a sharp little breath, leaning closer all at once, breathing, "Catra." "There you are," Glimmer said as the door banged open. Catra shifted her gaze to glare, her heart pounding in her throat, Adora's shadow falling across her. "We're supposed to be... What's going on?" Glimmer frowned back and forth between them, her hands curling up into fists at her sides. "Nothing," Catra said, easing out of the windowsill and away from Adora. "Please," she said, around a sharp smile. "Tell us what we're supposed to be doing." Glimmer repeated what Adora had said, but with less tact and far less patience. Catra shook her head and refused with a smile that felt like it was cutting into the sides of her face. "You can't just say no," Glimmer told her. "This is our land. You can't just move in and take it." "You gave it up," Catra said. "No," Glimmer said. "The Horde took it, but we beat the Horde." "Adora beat the Horde," Catra corrected, sharply. "So if we're letting the victors decide the spoils, I suppose it's up to her who gets to live here and under what conditions." She turned to look at Adora, frowning at the edge of the table, arms crossed and head down. She ignored the victorious look in Glimmer's face. "Well?" she asked. Adora worked her jaw from side to side before looking up. "This was once Bright Moon territory," she said slowly, and Catra saw Glimmer glowing brighter out of the corner of her eye. "But," Adora continued, looking up to meet Catra's eyes, "it hasn't been, for a long time." "What?" Glimmer demanded. "Borders change," Adora said. "The Horde took over a tremendous portion of the world. No extant kingdom will be able to repair all of the damage and take back over all of the space. There were kingdoms completely destroyed and consumed. And that needs to be addressed," Glimmer said. "There are princesses that can be set up." "No," Catra said, her hands curling into fists. "No princess is going to take over Haven." Glimmer scoffed. "There were already 2 princesses here. Why aren't they in the meeting anyway? I'm sure they would—" "They don't want to be here," Catra said. "They don't care about this kind of thing. It doesn't matter to them, don't you get it? Entrapta wants to be out there," she waved a hand, "figuring out how to make the sun power our waste processors. Scorpio wants to see how much she can carry at once and to then come home, put on her dancing shoes and the prettiest dress, and go party. They don't want to sit here and argue about who gets what or what's best for the city or any of that. They're just people. They don't want to lead. And frankly, that's for the best, since they aren't very good at it." "And you are?" Glimmer barked back, standing, her hands flat on the table. Catra stared at her, 1,000 voices in the back of her head, reminding her that she wasn't good at anything, that she couldn't do anything right, not like Adora, not like... "Yes," Adora said, quiet and sure and steady as the foundations of the world. "She really is." Glimmer looked betrayed, boggling over at Adora. "How can you say that?" Adora shook her head. Her smile looked pained. She gestured towards the wall, to the city beyond. "Didn't you see Haven?" she asked. People are coming here for a reason, Glimmer." "She's making them." "No," Adora frowned. Catra stared at her, hating the way her ribs were biting into her lungs, the tightness in her throat, the burn in her eyes. She wished she could blink. She wished she could look away. "Don't. There's food, shelter, and safety here. And it's working, Glimmer. No one here is going to starve or freeze to death this winter." "Neither is anyone in Bright Moon." "Really?" Adora asked, cocking her head to the side. "Have you seen some of the villages?" Glimmer flushed. "And whose fault is it that it got so bad? The Horde?" "It doesn't really matter who did it," Adora said, something hard in her eyes, hard and familiar. "Not to the people who might not make it to spring, you know?" "Well, maybe they should all come here if it's so great." "They're welcome to," Catra drawled, tired of watching the pair of them argue over her head. "Entrapta has been working up some plans to build some new settlements. There are already volunteers ready to move out to Reclamation and Scrap Heap." Adora blinked at her. "Scrap Heap?" Catra shrugged. "I didn't pick the names." "You can't keep expanding," Glimmer said, her eyes wide. "This is Bright Moon's land, and..." And we're not planning on expanding in your direction, Catra said, resisting the urge to flatten her ears against her head. This is unacceptable, Glimmer said, blotchy color in her cheeks. And Adora said, Glimmer, I need to talk to you. She looked over at Catra, her mouth set, and asked, Do you mind? Catra waved a hand, rising from the table and striving to keep her shoulders even as she walked out of the room. Be my guest, she said, and walked down the hall and into her room before she slammed the side of her palm against the wall, trembling all over with unspent anxiety. I think I talked Glimmer around, Adora said, the next morning, sitting down with a plate full of breakfast. Catra glanced at her sideways. Around a what? Adora pushed the food on her plate around. Around the understanding that you're, a self-governing freeholding. Catra wrinkled her nose and Adora flushed. It's something I've seen written about in First One's ruins. Oh, well then, I suppose that's what we are. Catra speared a piece of sausage and chewed it viciously. It is nice here, Adora said, her head bowed over her plate. Catra tapped her fork on the plate. You should stay then, she said, knowing that Adora wouldn't, even as she said it, hating that she couldn't even really muster anger about it anymore. She had not, really, been able to feel angry with Adora since she'd seen her almost dead. It wasn't fair. Adora sighed. I have to go back, she said. I need to make Queen Angela understand what's going on. Catra snorted. Sure, she said, standing up. Catra, Adora called, reaching out, her fingers curling warm around Catra's wrist. Catra stared down at her, her upturned face and her shining eyes. I have work to do, Catra said and tugged her arm free. She drew her shoulders up and walked away, ignoring the itch down the back of her neck. Adora, Glimmer, and their retinue were gone by the time she returned for the day.